Valentine's Day just passed, and this coming weekend, sports fans have plenty to love. Typically, our Bronxnet cameras would be heading to the NBA All-Star Game to check out the dunk comp and the Sunday Showdown. But this year, I'm heading to Daytona for the Daytona 500, checking off another box on my sports bucket list. In honor of racing, I put on my Lewis Hamilton F1 jacket this morning because the recent perk in the weather is a strong sign that racing is set to return in 2019. And the first jewel in the crown of the race season is definitely the Daytona 500. In every major professional sport, there's one event that is more prestigious than all the others. Golf has the Masters, tennis has Wimbledon, football has the Super Bowl, hockey has the Stanley Cup, and so on and so forth. But the one thing that makes NASCAR different than all of the other pro sports is that their biggest race of the year does not happen at the end of the season. It happens in the beginning. The Daytona 500 marks the official start to the NASCAR season each year and remains their biggest race with the largest payouts of any other race in the year, and it isn't even close. For example, in 2015, Joey Logano won $1.5 million after winning the Daytona 500, and the next highest payout that season was close to $500,000. In other words, in NASCAR, the Daytona 500 is a big deal. In racing, the Daytona 500 is a big deal. So to get ready for this Sunday's race, which starts 2:30 p.m. in Florida, here are the top 10 finishes in Daytona 500 history. Coming in at number 10, Kevin Harvick comes out of nowhere on the last lap to edge Mark Martin by half a fender in a thrilling finish in 2007. Behind them, as they race to the checkered flag, a huge crash takes out a number of cars, including Clint Bowyer's Chevrolet, which flips and catches fire. Number 9, and an extremely popular finish, Bobby Allison wins over son Davey, the only time in history that a father-son combination finished 1-2 in the Daytona 500. At age 50, Bobby becomes the oldest 500 winner. That was 1988. The 8th spot belongs to Denny Hamlin. In 2016, 5 Toyota drivers race in lockstep over the closing laps, with Hamlin edging Martin Truex Jr. at the start-finish line by 0.010 seconds in the closest Daytona 500 finish since the advent of electronic timing and scoring. 6 years earlier, in 2011, the Daytona 500 saw one of the greatest sports upsets in history. The 7th spot on my list of the top 10 Daytona 500 finishes goes to Trevor Bayne. Bayne captures the Daytona 500 and only his second career NASCAR Premier Series start. Bayne's victory, which comes one day after he turns 20, is the first for the Wood brothers in a decade. Coming in at number 6, Michael Waltrip breaks an 462 streak to win his first NASCAR points race ahead of Dale Earnhardt Inc. teammate Dale Earnhardt Jr. But on the last corner of the last lap, team owner and 7-time NASCAR Premier Series champion Dale Earnhardt is killed in a crash, a heartbreaking finish in 2001. Number 5, with father Ned Jarrett in the TV booth calling the dramatic finish, and nervous mother Martha in the motorhome. Dale Jarrett holds off Dale Earnhardt on the last lap to win what becomes known as the Dale and Dale Show. That was 1993. More Intimidator in 1998 in the 4th spot, one of my faves. Dale Earnhardt ends 20 years of frustration by finally winning the Daytona 500. Afterward, virtually every crew member in the entire garage lines up along pit road to salute the man in black as he rolls by in the black number 3 Richard Childress Racing Chevy. We go back in time to 1959 for the very first Daytona 500, and the number 3 spot on my top 10 list of the best Daytona 500 finishes. Petty family patriarch Lee Petty captures the inaugural Daytona 500 in a photo finish that isn't made official, check this out, until the following Wednesday. That race helps put NASCAR on the national map. In the 2nd spot, on the last lap, NASCAR legends Richard Petty and David Pearson wreck each other, going for the victory, with Pearson able to refire his Wood Brothers Racing Mercury and limp across the finish line for the victory. That was 1976. And in the top spot, I'll actually take last year's Daytona 500. The number 3 was number 1 again at Daytona on a day and a race and a place forever linked with the great Dale Earnhardt. Austin Dillon won the Daytona 500 driving the iconic number 3 Chevrolet that Earnhardt piloted for most of his career. Earnhardt was behind the wheel of number 3 when he won his only Daytona 500 in 1998, as mentioned, and when he was killed in an accident on the final lap of the race 3 years later. Dillon's victory in the 60th running of the Great American Race came 17 years to the day of Earnhardt's fatal crash. We hit the C-list for my pick this Sunday. The 61st edition of the Daytona 500 gets underway Sunday as NASCAR's top drivers get the new season started with one of the sport's most historic races. Daytona International Speedway will host the Great American Races. Drivers take on the 2.5-mile track. Austin Dillon won the race last year despite only leading one lap and starting from the number 14 position. The 500 is a tricky race, of course. My money will be on Kevin Harvick. For the majority of the 2018 season, Harvick, Kyle Busch, and Martin Truex Jr. controlled the narrative. With so many wins, they were dubbed the Big Three. Harvick and Busch racked up 8 checkered flags each, while Truex had 4. And even though all 3 made it to the championship race at Homestead Miami Speedway, Joey Logano ended up winning it all with his 3rd victory of the season. Despite saying that, I'll be rooting for Jimmie Johnson. The 7-time Cup Series champ is undeniably one of the best drivers on the track, but the 2018 season was his first in 17 years as a full-time driver without a trip to victory lane. The 43-year-old Johnson has 83 career wins, but his last was in June of 2017 at Dover International Speedway. 2018 wasn't a great year for him. Johnson still managed to make the playoffs last season despite not winning a race, but he might not get so lucky this time. However, he has a new crew chief this year and could start on the right foot with a win at the Daytona 500. I like to see old-time legends pull it off. Safe bet is Harvick. Dream finish, Johnson. How about Harvick and Johnson head-to-head on the final lap? Sounds good to me. Enjoy the race. That's your sports. I'm Bobby C.